A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. That's what Deuteronomy tells us our people are. A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. Every family has its own stories. They define us. They tell us who we are. Each family tells its own. All of our families tell their stories, where we came from, what we are about, what our people have always done. God's people tell the story of being slaves back in Egypt, and they were saved from there. That's what God's people are. Back there we were slaves, and God set us free. A wandering Aramean was my ancestors. The stories we tell make us who we are today. Father's Day is a very special day for that perspective, because the stories we tell about our fathers really reflect on who we think we should be, either copying that, distancing ourselves from that story, relating to that story somehow. So when we look at Father's Day today, we look at the patriarchs of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Israel defines itself through those three patriarchs. Families are defined by the stories they tell, and that's especially true for fathers. So looking at Abraham, one word comes to mind, and that is blessing. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It's the promise that is given to Abraham. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And how does that come down? By him giving up his family. God doesn't care for family values. The first thing God says to Abraham is, go away from your family. Leave them behind. Don't worry about your family. People of the covenant are those that are called away out of their lives. They're called to leave behind their loved ones. Go to the unknown. Go to where the unknown, because that's where your blessing is going to be. Happened for the entire people later in Egypt. Leave your comfort zone. What was it like for you when you left your comfort zone at one point? Did you ever do that? Always in your comfort zone? Oh, God's calling you. Did you ever stretch your comfort zone? Uh-huh. What was that like? Presentations that are uncomfortable, where you have to stretch your level of what you can do and think you should be doing. How have you stretched your comfort zone?
Just spray. Just spray.
Yep.
Yeah.
Prayer might help you extend your horizon there. Blessing is where the unknown is. Abraham, leave everything you know and go to that unknown space and future that I sent you to. That's the example of Abraham, stretching your comfort zone. Then comes the second story about the second arch-father of Israel, Isaac. You all know that story from Genesis 22. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. The one who's tested there is not really Abraham, it's Isaac. Now imagine that. You have a young man, best physical ability, and he has himself, bound by his father, put on that altar, and is ready to be sacrificed. He didn't have to do that, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But yet he allowed his dad to bind him, put him on the altar, and threaten his life. That's a test of faith. Not so much Abraham. He did what he always did. Isaac surrendered himself to that situation. He trusted his father with his life, literally. What does that tell us about fathering? Let's see. How much do you trust your father? A lot. Would you have yourself bound on an altar and him with a knife over you? Wow. Scarily impressive. How much do you trust your father, Ray? A lot? How much? Little? How did you earn that trust? Your father. How do you trust him? All right. He's always there for you? That's how that works. So we are used to being able to trust our dads. Sometimes that doesn't work out too well and they betray our trust. And that hurts especially deadly, because they are in a situation where their knives could easily cut our throats. Some dads do. We're lucky to not have heard any of those situations today. So the story of Isaac is one of trust. Jacob. Jacob ultimately being named Israel, the father of the nation of God's people. On his deathbed, he blessed his sons, the 12 tribes. And each and every one of them he gave a special, personalized blessing. So I could read all 12 to you, but they're lengthy. Simon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Those two are always trouble. That was 2 out of the 12. So every son gets his individual blessing, and by that Jacob tells stories. One he praises for his great cooking skills. 2 are violent, others are successful leaders, great hunters, whatever sons could be good at or bad at. Some he praises for their faith, some for their business fortune, sons you wouldn't want to have and you would want to have. He's disappointed by some, brags about others. Hey, 12 sons. It's a mixed basket. What that tells us is that fatherhood is not the same for every child. We have different children, and they do different things differently. And also, the grown-ups among us, we have stories that our parents would tell about us on the occasion of a blessing. So what kind of a child are you? Perfect. What kind of a child are you? Perfect. Do we have a non-perfect child? What would your dad say? What kind of a child are you? An obedient child. Let me find someone naughty. What would your dad say? What kind of a child are you?
Probably I tried the best at whatever I tried, but I didn't succeed at everything.
Oh, you try hard and succeed at times. All right. What would your dad say you are?
He's right here.
Yeah, but what would he say? What say you would he say?
I think he would say I was a faithful child.
A faithful child. What would your dad tell us about you?
You probably understand that life is not a spelling bee. I can make one mistake and
I'd have to sit down. Life was more like a Major League Baseball season. You lose a lot and still be successful.
It's a long stretch, more like a baseball season than a spelling bee. Love it. So Jacob blesses his 12 sons, each personally, about their journey and their story, about trying and failing, about being obedient, about being perfect, about being someone who is working their way along over a long period of time. Those are the kind of children that we are from the few samples that we took. Then we heard another passage from Matthew 2, and that is that after the story we call Christmas, Joseph grabbed baby Jesus and Mary and they ran off to Egypt. And after it was safe to return after Herod's death, they came back to the promised land. And again the old saying came in, out of Egypt I have called my son, like the entire people thousands of years before. This time around, baby Jesus. Let's look at his dad. Can you imagine how tough Joseph's job was, raising the Son of God as his own? You're not my dad. That teenager must have been hell to talk to. You're not my dad. That's probably why the Bible doesn't contain any childhood stories of Jesus. That was a tough job for Joseph. He wasn't his dad. He was his dad. He acted as it's hard. A couple of things became clear in Matthew. With Jesus being God and human at the same time, God himself is part of a blended, non-traditional family with a foster father in those situations. Secondly, that whole bunch had to go back to Egypt and back to the promised land pretty much like the forefathers of old. A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. God's people are always on the move. A wandering Aramean was my ancestor, going into strange places, finding blessing there, being challenged and blessed in many different ways. Amen.